Good morning guys, we're back at it again with another video. We got our new Aquamate water tank install. A lot of you have obviously watched it, but if you want to check out the video on the install of that, it'll be up in the cards up there. I'll also leave a link in the description box and in the comment section below. But now that we've got the tank installed, I can start working on the pump house. So we're going to be building an external pump house. It's just going to be wood framed, and I'm getting the same sheet metal as the VersaTube garage. So it's going to look very similar. It's going to match in obviously with everything. But before I can run the downspouts going into the tank, I want to get all of this done first, because the water supply lines and the conduit that's going to be going into it are going to be at a deeper depth than the pipes coming from the downspout. So I want to get this done first. Once I at least get the pipes in there, everything doesn't have to be complete, and I can start backfilling the trench. Then I can finish off the downspouts and get them right into the tank. That's enough chit chat, let's get started.
And getting started we are. So whenever I'm doing threaded connections with PVC or with rigid, I always use a combination of the thread tape and the pipe goop. It seems to work best for me and not causing any leaks. John from Aquamate also let me know to not lose this PVC adapter because it has British threads on it and is not very common here in the States. So a round of applause for Handeeman. He's using his channel locks in the correct way. Big round of applause. Another question that I had on the downspout video is why I'm using this kind of purple PVC glue and not the standard combination of using purple primer and cement. There's actually a local code distinction. So you can use this stuff and it's totally fine to use, makes a great connection. It just really depends on where you are and what the local codes are. Since we don't have any building inspections out here, I can just use obviously whatever I want. One thing to note is that when you're using a reducer bushing for the PVC is that you also have to get a coupling for it as well. That's one thing that I always tend to forget. So I had to have Hannah grab me a 2-inch coupling just from the local store. Anyways, so we're going from 2-inch PVC down to 1.25 inch. And the reason for that is just because the inlet on the shallow well pump that we're going to be using inside the pump house takes 1.25 inch for its inlet. And I'm also trying to get this pipe pretty level. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but it's got to be level enough for government work. I actually mentioned that in an Instagram story, and someone actually thought I was doing work for the government, but that's just kind of a funny saying. Anyways, I'm laying out the lumber that we're going to be using for the edges of the concrete formwork. So we're just using some standard 12-foot 2x4s and then some 6-foot 3-inch 2x4s to give us a 6-foot by 12-foot slab. And so all I'm doing here is just taking some 3-inch screws and just screwing through the ends into the 12-foot pieces, and then that gives me my perfect 6x12 slab. Whenever I'm designing this type of stuff, I always try to design it in such a way that I'm using full sheets or full lengths of lumber. So even like with the walls on top of it, trying to use as many full 8-foot lengths as possible just kind of makes it easier for construction. So one thing that I have to be very, very specific with are my distances from the edge of the slab. So I've already kind of mapped out exactly how I'm going to plumb everything and how I'm going to wire everything in my mind. So I need to get the pipes going up through the slab very specific to where I want them. And so this is where having a 3D model definitely comes into play. I think for this project, what I'm going to do is release the 3D model and the material list. So if you want to do the same type of project, then you can have that. It'll probably be like $5 or $10 or something like that. But one other preventative measure that I took was actually wrapping all the PVC pipe and the PEX just with some of this black pipe wrap. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's this 10 mil pipe wrap that you can find at the hardware store. Just with the nature of concrete, I just thought it would give an extra level of protection for the pipe, just so that it doesn't possibly corrode through it over time or anything like that. I mean, it's only probably a quarter worth of tape, so just a little extra. Next thing that I'm doing here is I'm insulating this 2-inch PVC line coming from the water tank just with some insulative pipe wrap. And for us in our area, we don't get cold enough for long enough, so we don't have freezing temperatures for long enough to really freeze certain size pipes. So with this 2-inch pipe, It may freeze, the water may freeze in it, but just adding this little bit of insulation tape will keep it from freezing. With a 1/2-inch pipeline, it's definitely going to freeze. With a 4-inch pipes, it's not going to freeze. I haven't had any issues with that. So adding this pipe insulation, it costs about $6 for the pipe insulation, but then also gives you some extra peace of mind that this main water line going into the pump house is definitely not going to freeze. And then I finished it off with some of that 10 mil pipe wrap, just because that insulative pipe wrap, I don't know how well it's really going to handle out in the weather, but this 10 mil pipe wrap, the black stuff there, is definitely going to hold up a lot better. What this actually kind of reminds me of is taping up a hockey stick. So yeah, my Canadianness is coming out because I had to do that as a kid. And so now what I can do is I can start inserting my concrete stakes to hold the form boards together, or exactly where they need to be. So I'm doing these back 2 corners first because these are my 2 high points. So it'll just make it a little bit easier to adjust the other sides just by lifting them up and getting it exactly where I want. So I got that back side nice and leveled off, and then I can start working on the other corners here. And then before I actually attach the other 2 stakes, is that I made sure that the slab was square. So it's just like a little bit off. And then once you make any adjustments, go back, measure again. And then if you have to make any more adjustments, it's much easier to do this now, rather than trying to do it at a later time. I know for sure in the comments section below, people are going to be wondering, why is the pump house so close to the water tank? It frankly just doesn't need to be that far away. And the further that I push it away, it kind of makes it a little bit trickier for other pipes and other conduit that I have planned. So that's why it's that close. Another thing that I do with these concrete stakes is specific for when we're screeding the concrete, is that I put them below the level of the concrete form boards. And that's just because when you're screeding, then you don't have other obstacles to kind of go around when you're screeding it out. And once we get this all leveled off, then we can start backfilling all the trench areas here. So something that I've mentioned in other videos is the importance of using water, especially when we're compressing the sand. Our soil tends to be around 30 to 40% clay content. So when you add just a little bit of water to it, it compacts so much nicer. And I could really tell the difference when I was basically using the tamper that you're going to see in a little bit. When I was tamping this fresh soil, I could really compress it really well. But the area that I didn't dig out, it was so rock solid. And all of that was compressed just with the wheels of the tractor. So it definitely makes a significant difference for us for the basically how solid everything is going to be. And since we're going to be pouring concrete on top of this, we want our foundation to obviously be very nice and strong. We don't want any settling to happen or anything like that, because that could potentially cause a failure with the concrete. And for areas where I don't need to tamp and I can get the tractor, it's just much easier to use the wheels on the tractor to compress things down. And have to be very careful around this tank. There's no way I want to put a big ding or dent in this brand new water tank. So got to just be very careful with it. But getting everything nice and compacted is always really good. And just based on my 3D model, I know that this PEX water line and the 1/2-inch conduit that's coming into it, I know it needs to be about 8 inches from the edge of the slab. Once you take into account the 1.5-inch sheeting ledge, the thickness of the wall, and then the interior thickness of the plywood that it's going to be sheeted with, that'll give me about a 1/2-inch gap between the wall and where the pipes are. So I just use a 2x4 and then just strapped the pipes right to it. Now, something that I thought of afterwards was actually doing a small floor drain in there. Now, the floor drain is mainly going to be used not for flooding issues or anything like that, but it will certainly help with that. But with one of the sediment filters that we have, it's recommended that they be discharged, I think, every day or every other day. So I'm going to come up with a way that it can be automatically done. And then the discharge line is just going to go to this floor drain. So I thought just an easy way of doing it would be to do a simple French drain. And it's really important for me, again, just to get the distance from the edge of the slab correct, just so that the wall isn't like on top of the floor drain or anything like that. So I just use a 2-inch PVC pipe, drilled some holes through it, and backfilled it with gravel. Bill let me know that I might need to actually extend that pipe a little bit further, because I don't know if it will be able to handle the amount of discharge that'll be coming out of the filter, but it might be fine. So if I need to fix it, then I can just dig up the gravel, add some more 2-inch pipe to it, and then we're good to go. And then we can cut up all of our rebar, many pieces at once here. And when I'm doing a slab like this, it's very easy just to find a concrete rebar spacing kind of program on the internet. So we're spacing everything at 16 inches apart from each other. And then there's also a 3-inch clearance from the edge of the rebar to the side of the form boards there. And so then at all the connection points, I just use some tie wire just to connect everything together. This project, I've tried to reuse or just to use up all extra materials that I've had from other projects, because I know there's different tie wires and stuff that you can buy that are much easier rather than having a big roll of it and doing that. But yeah, I just use a standard tie wire. And then I had, I think, about 7 or 8 Adobe blocks left over from when I did the culvert cisterns with Joe. So I just used those up because you definitely don't want your rebar sitting on the ground as you're pouring concrete into it. It really doesn't do its job while it's laying on the ground. So the Adobe blocks just help you, give you that space. And then you don't have to worry about lifting up the rebar as you're pouring the concrete onto it, because that's another way of doing it as well. And then across the entire perimeter, we're doing an 1.5-inch sheeting ledge. So I'm just attaching a 2-inch piece or a 2x2 to the inside of the formwork there. And then that's going to give us a nice little ledge for the sheet metal to slide right over. And then it'll just kind of clean up the edge. And it's the same way that we did the garage slab. So I thought, we might as well do it again for this. And I'm just using some 2-inch screws going from the outside to the inside into that 2x2. And when it countersinks into it, then you get probably at least a good 3/4 inch worth of bite into it. All right, guys, so we are ready to get going. Pouring the slab here. We got our concrete, we got our mixer, we got all the rebar in there nice. And then we also got Mr. Bill again. It's becoming a staple on the channel. So you guys got him well over 2,000 subscribers. So maybe we can get him up to 5,000.
5,000. 5,000.
5,000 for the 60-year-old guy. The old guy doing it.
The old guy.
He's doing it.
I mean, you gotta watch the old guy. The old guy's busting his hump to get it done.
I've got 60 bags of concrete. I don't know if we're gonna go through all of them because that's for a 6x12 slab at 6 inches, whereas this is probably closer to 4.5, maybe 5. So we should have some extra, which I need for other stuff. So let's get started. So mixing the concrete for a slab this size, getting a concrete truck is definitely not really worth it for such a small little area. So for a size of slab this small, 2 guys is certainly sufficient. What I learned when I was doing the yoga pavilion slab is that we probably should have had a 3rd person there, doing the floating and doing the troweling and all that, doing the finished trowel. Just because this is a very time-sensitive process, and especially in the dry Arizona heat here, the concrete cures probably much faster than other areas. So it's very time-sensitive, and I'm really a big fan of this concrete mixer because it's kind of like a wheelbarrow and concrete mixer in one. So rather than transferring the concrete into a wheelbarrow and then pouring it in, you can just pour it in right from the cement mixer. So I think the brand is Cushman or Cushlin or something like that. I think I just got it at Home Depot, but it does a nice job. And we can do 2 bags at once and just pour it directly right in there. We've got our kind of basic water recipe. We have a 3-gallon bucket with some lines on the inside. And so we just use that just to make sure that we're trying to get a consistent cement mixture. We definitely don't want it too wet. We definitely don't want it too dry. Just right in the middle, that nice kind of concrete soft serve. So probably one of the most satisfying parts of doing concrete is when you start screeding things across and you can really start to see how nice and flat everything is. So we screeded this first section after I think we did 20 bags or so. I'd probably recommend doing the screeding just a little bit more often, maybe after every 10 or 15 bags. But one thing that we would do is that, or one thing that we did here is that we would screed across, clean up the edges, and then go back and screed it again. Just because sometimes when you're screeding across, some of the concrete can get under the screed board and then it kind of raises it up a little bit. So if you do a couple passes there, I think you're going to be much more pleased with the results. We're definitely not concrete experts or anything like that, so I'm sure people in the comments will let me know how we're messing things up. But at the end of the day, it turned out
exactly how we want it. It turned out really nice. And the concrete process certainly gets kind of tedious. So you're just mixing bags, pouring it in there, mixing bags, pouring it in there, floating it, and then getting the finished trowel down. But for this, I mean, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but it's really just got to be good enough. So Bill and I, we're just finishing off. We're just kind of floating the last little bit here, and then we'll go across and screed the final little piece here. I can take that 8-inch or 9.5-inch piece of wood that I had in there earlier, because basically those pipes aren't going to be moving from where they are. We can finish screeding things off. And then what I did just to finish things off was put a piece of poly on it to actually slow down the curing process, because it is summertime here. And while it is kind of humid, it's recommended to kind of slow it down, because you don't want the concrete to cure too fast and cause any cracks or anything like that. A little tip for getting these concrete stakes out: just hit it with a hammer on both sides, and then you should be able to lift it up, and then we can just pull off the form boards, and then we're looking real nice.
All right guys, so the slab came out pretty nice. There's just a few places, specifically on that corner and 2 places on that side right there, where I just didn't push the concrete down enough or try to float it underneath that sheeting ledge there. It doesn't really make that big of a deal, since we're just going to be setting the sheet metal panels on it, and they're 36 inches wide, so it's really not a big deal. I don't know how many days, maybe somebody can answer me this. How many days should I wait for this to fully cure until I can start drilling anchors into it? Because that's how I'm going to be securing the walls to this. So I know right now, obviously, it's still going to be a little bit wet inside. So let me know how many days I should wait before I can start building on top of it. And turned out great. Awesome. That is part 1. This is probably going to be a 3-part series. So the next part is going to be building the pump house walls, and then probably the 3rd part will be doing all the plumbing and stuff on the inside. Awesome guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next video. Talk to you soon. Peace.